We're back for another exciting episode of The Spicy Life. I am your relationship expert and magnetic matchmaker, Spicy-Mari. And on today's episode of The Spicy Life, I'm sharing with you how an alpha woman attracts an alpha man. And to join me in the G-spot, that's guest spotlight, as you know, I have the amazing, the incredible honor of bringing on S.P.I.C.Y. S.P.I.C.Y is my phenomenal husband, but he is also co-founder of The Spicy Life, has a BA and a MBA in finance. So of course he does everything in the operations realm, financial for The Spicy Life, and he is my partner in crime. I haven't quite figured out who's good cop, bad cop. I think I'm good cop, he's bad cop in the relationship.
Definitely.
But our partnership has been a beautiful journey. And oftentimes when I'm coaching people on relationship advice and giving them the tools for success based on S.P.I.C.Y, I often will use reference to my relationship, of course, my studies and, you know, the academia that I've researched when it comes to my method and how that applies. But today I really want to share with you personal insight. I'm letting you into my love life. And I brought my amazing husband who's willing to allow me to exploit him for today's episode. So I could turn this whole episode into, you know, how a man decides to get married or what that looks like. What are some of these responsibilities, but I really wanted to do an episode for like my alpha queens out there who are very headstrong, used to being in leadership positions. And oftentimes when you have a strong personality, or even when you come from a household where you saw the matriarchy in a very powerful position, or at least maybe even single parent, handling all of the business herself, you too take on some of that energy and start to operate in a very independent way. And oftentimes that looks like you sitting in, sometimes even in like the workplace, your masculine energy, where you become very successful and know how to operate because you know how to govern, you know how to teach, guide, you know how to instruct, you know how to direct. You have high level of confidence, you know how to provide this like amazing logic, focus, you're assertive. Like these are some of the energies that come sitting in your natural masculine. And I want to be very clear with you guys that masculine and feminine energy come in duo package. When you're born, you have both energies. But as a woman and as a man, you decide based on your life experiences, based on some genetic predisposition, and also based on your relationship experiences, which energy you lean more into. So me in particular, while I am naturally extremely feminine, life experiences from heartache to being extremely successful and pushed into leadership roles, to my single parent home, also having, I'm Black and Mexican. So I come from two very strong cultures that, you know, the women are very powerful. Took on a lot of masculine energy, especially not having a consistent male in the household. My mother was married multiple times. So just kind of like giving you guys some background on like what embodies Spicy-Mari and like how I was built and how I left a lot of my feminine energy for masculine energy, because it also became a wall and protecting and ability for me to use more concrete decision making when it came to even relationship and protecting myself, right? But what had happened in that was me losing my natural feminine. And while I was in this place of, you know, operating from natural masculine and not tearing down some of these like boundaries that I was putting up, I was also starting to experience things that were putting me in a wounded place, because I was also attracting men in their wounded masculine, because now I had been hurt, or I was attracting someone who maybe was emotionally unavailable or someone who wasn't ready for commitment. And so the experiences that I had in my relationships started creating this like self-fulfilling prophecy of, you know, men are going to treat you right. And you guys probably are relating to some of this. I'm sure you guys have experienced a lot of this too, when you experience heartache or things not working out in what you envisioned for your future when it comes to relationships. So you start to put up this wall so that you can't get hurt again. And instead of you being in your natural feminine or natural masculine, based on which one you decide to lean into, we start getting and operating in our wounded. And so I started operating my wounded feminine and wounded masculine, all the while knowing based on experience, right? So the first thing is like, knowing how you naturally are. And I'm going to start applying like S.P.I.C.Y to this. As you guys know, or if not, if you're just tuning in and you haven't been following like the Spicy Life, my method is based off of self, passion, intimacy, communication, and learning to say yes. So that acronym is S.P.I.C.Y. Those are the 5 ingredients you need for a healthy relationship. What I had to do sitting in a powerful position or being in my, alpha feminine was really assess who I am, what I want, and what I have to offer. And so in my dating process, I'm going through a multiple variety of different types of men. Sorry, Poppy, I gotta take you down memory lane for this. But I really did date like a variety. There was nobody who I excluded, not a color, not a height, not a weight, like in the beginning of my dating phases, I decided that I was going to just be open so that I could have these experiences and really understand more about who I am and how I show up in these experiences with others. So understanding that I personally was not as compatible based on focusing really on self and becoming more self-full. And what self-full is full of self-love and knowing what I needed, I started operating from a place of realizing I need a alpha man. I want a very masculine man. The feminine man, or the man who leans more into his feminine, is going to be more nurturing. He's going to be more emotional. He's going to be more sensitive. He's going to be a lot more kind. He's going to go with the flow. And he's also going to operate with radiance and unconditional love. And while those things are amazing, sitting in your natural feminine, I understood that I wanted to sit in my natural feminine. I know that I am used to like taking the reins, but I wanted to take a seat back. I wanted to be able to not just show up in my natural feminine, but I wanted a protector, I wanted a provider, and I wanted someone who professed their undying love for me. And I wanted to be the feminine force that pulled the feminine energy out of them. So knowing that I really wanted this like male alpha figure, I had to take a beat and start dating with intent after I got all my experiments out the way. And went through certain phases we won't talk about now, that I'm sure y'all know what phase I'm talking about. We all go through it. But going through those experiences taught me more about what I wanted, right? So then I had to understand, if I'm going to sit in my feminine and attract masculine, what does that look like? So of course, like me understanding the science behind things and really doing a lot of studies, I had to not just dissect masculine and feminine energy, but also heal some of the wounded feminine and wounded masculine that was showing up for me. Defensiveness, competitiveness, being over emotional in my wounded feminine, but in my wounded masculine, having a lot of like aggression, right? I'm a hunter for a living. I do that for the Spicy Life because I'm also a magnetic matchmaker. So having to know that I can create opportunity in speaking to men, but then falling back and allowing the opportunity to take its place and allowing the man to lead. So I say all this to say, to get you guys through this spicy process and how it applies to masculine, feminine energy. So the next phase of S.P.I.C.Y is passion. I had to understand what made me passionate, but also what makes the species that I'm trying to attract passionate. So really understanding like my hobbies, how I show up in shared activities, what things I actually have in common with men, what are her common interests. If that's something that you guys haven't thought a lot about, I want you to sit with that. So I'm going to toss it back to my husband, who's been so kind to like, let me talk. And I want you to speak to like in your first encounter with me, right? What was the first phase, or what was the first experience you had that attracted you to me? Knowing that I was this like feisty, extra kind of woman, what was the initial attraction based off of?
Well, it sounds like I had to be a brute, like a me want Jane type dude. Knock you up now.
You didn't
even
holler at me or ask me for my number in the beginning.
I mean, we met each other a number of times, so depending on which time you're referring to, I mean,
I'm talking about at the happy hour. You did not ask for my number.
I was not even in that the zone.
Okay.
I mean, anyway.
So we can get into the story of like how we met.
I got your number eventually when it was the right time. So that's the other thing. Let's just be honest. A guy, I mean, we use this term thirsty all the time. I definitely wasn't thirsty. And I think I think you may have recognized that. I mean, actually, was on my way to a bachelor party the day you're referring to. So I might have been thinking and about all the level of debauchery. I didn't get into any debauchery. I actually did not. And to be honest, on my way down, I was thinking about her. So I'll just be honest there and tell you that. So, but at the same time, you know, we had a common. I had met you so many times. We had so many common, you know, acquaintances and some close friends actually. That something inside me knew that, you know, if it was meant to be, it was meant to be. We say this all the time: if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. At some point, you have to realize that, well, okay, if I really want her, I have a way of getting in touch, and I did. You were working with one of my best friends at the time, so I had no issues of getting her number and getting her information.
But you did not. So, like, let me give you guys the real. What had actually happened was, I was working with one of his close friends on another show that I was working on, relationships. I think it was like Love on Top at the time. And I had requested a different guy show up at happy hour who I was crushing on, that I knew my co-host was friends with. He did not bring that guy to the happy hour. He brought my husband. Thank God. Still haven't gone out with that guy ever in history. But he brought my husband. And at the time, I didn't know that was my husband. I was expecting someone else. I was just coming out of a breakup. So my energy was somewhat like, I'm ready to be back on the scene and date, but I still hadn't done enough of like that work that I was mentioning to you that I knew that I needed to do in order to prepare for my purpose mate.
And it showed.
Yeah, I was like, in my masculine.
You weren't ready to.
I was definitely like talking smack. I was definitely like putting up some like walls and barriers, and he felt that energy. He felt that the barriers were there, which may be why you didn't ask for my number, but like by the end of the meal, I'd already decided like, he's not even who I wanted. I'm cool. I don't need to see this person ever again.
And mind you, I wasn't invited there as a connection. It was happened to be in the neighborhood that we live in, and I was on my way out, and he got lucky. He said, "Hey, are you at home?" I was like, "Well, I'm on my way out." He was like, "Come by." So I didn't know that he was trying to make a connection, but at the same time, in having conversations with her, she seemed very nice, but she also seemed like she was.
I like the word nice. I don't hear that often.
She was operating in her wounded feminine.
I was. So definitely hurt from a previous experience, but on my path to recovery, right? Doing the work necessary in order to heal. And so we did not exchange information. He didn't holler at me, and I was fine with that. Decided like, we don't ever need to see each other again, because I didn't feel an instant connection at first. So fast forward to a fight party where a mutual friend had invited both of us, but we didn't know that each other was coming, and hadn't thought like again about my husband. At this fight party, wound up hugging everyone when I first came in, and he was one of the people who I hugged, and me not remembering him, he was like, "Don't you remember me from the happy hour?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I guess so," even though I really didn't. I hug everyone. He still swears I remembered him. I hug everyone. Everyone gets to feel special when they first meet me. So realizing like, okay, we did meet before, and I was kind of off put by you. He showed up with a different energy as well. He was a little bit softer. He was a little bit more like friendly in that environment. He was grinning from ear to ear, happy that he saw me. But my energy had also shifted. I had already made a decision, a cognizant decision, that no matter what, I was going to force myself to have more passion in my life. So even though I didn't want to go to that fight party, and I wanted to stay home, I had decided that based on S.P.I.C.Y, I was going to push myself to experience different things in different social environments, or take myself out of my comfort zone and do my hair and makeup and force myself out of the house. One thing that I hear a complaint from you guys often is that you don't want to leave your house. You want to get dressed, you don't want to go socialize, you don't want to connect. I knew I had to do this, and I had to practice what I preach. So I had to ignite passion in my life, and I took my butt to this fight party, and I'm so happy that I did, because there I did show up after having done like my self-work a month or two later, after him and I had encountered each other, like still continuing my pursuit of growth, and was able to find common connections with him. Like, I I started not interrogating him, but asking him a lot of questions about himself, about spirituality at this fight party. It wound up turning into an extended night where even afterwards, even though we did have a talk about the Bible in the bar, it wound up turning into then hookah. Yeah, we were heathens that night. But then afterwards we went to Crave and like had an additional conversation because I was more open and I had done some of that work to heal some of that wounded that the previous relationship had brought on, but I was letting my guard down.
I like to think that because she wanted to spend more time with me, she was captivated by my, presence, but
I was definitely captivated. I was intrigued. I like to use the word intrigued. I hadn't made up my mind yet. And this is one thing, this is one thing that I tell my clients as well, that you can have interest, you can have intrigue, but to actually decide that you like a person or even that you love a person, you have to give that time and nourish the relationship. You have to ask them questions. You have to not just listen to the credibility component, like the words that they say, but you also need to have the reliability component in the actions that they take. So me understanding still some of my masculine energy, like, nope, I'm going to use strategy with this approach when it comes to building intimacy with this man, which is the next phase of S.P.I.C.Y. I had to decide, how am I going to build intimacy with him? Because I know I want a particular type of person. I want the of course, intelligent, successful alpha male. But what I really wanted was the superior man. I wanted the man who understood not just who he was, but also how to guide and lead my feminine energy and also some of my wounds as well. I wanted someone who was emotionally intelligent, but I had to show up that way in order to attract that. So that's where like that internal work came, also figuring out what passions we could connect on. And then now is the next phase of like building intimacy. So I gave you opportunities, and after having shared with you like my interests, we were able to find common interests. We were able to go through our passions of like working out together. We loved the movies. Yeah, that was like my favorite. Food. Like we were finding different things like outdoor activities. I'm an adrenaline junkie. So him supporting that or encouraging that and being fearless and like doing some of those things that I love with me. And even some of like the cheesy things that I love, like gondola rides, like, right? Because I do sit in my feminine too. Him exploring those with me. And so him being open to that, we were able to build more intimacy because showing up for these shared activities in passion, I allowed myself to be vulnerable. And by being vulnerable and sharing personal details about my life, I got him to share personal details about his. So can you speak a little bit to how I made you feel safe in the relationship to not show up such a like, I am man, hear me roar, but talk about your feelings and emotions and how things made you feel?
Well, you did that on the first, let's call that the first night of the fight party. What she failed to mention is that at the party, she ended up somehow convincing me to give her a back massage. So we're over in the corner, over there giving the back massage, and I just remember doing that and then turning around, and it must have been like a lot of time had elapsed because I turned around, everybody was just staring like, what are you guys doing? But, I was hesitant. I was like, what do you mean you want me to give you a massage? So, there was some resistance. But, she did the tame the wild bull exercise, and maybe that wasn't exercise she was doing. She's an expert. So, recognizing that, I was like, all right, whatever. It's a win-win for me. I get to rub all over you on the first date. I don't encourage you guys to do that. Maybe she's an expert, so leave that for the experts. You might get in trouble doing that. But what I'm using that as to saying that sort of opened up an avenue for me to say, okay, let me just put my guard down and share in this moment. So, that told me, it set sort of the ground stage or the precedence for, well, okay, maybe I can be vulnerable with her. And, I think that's something that's been sort of demonstrative throughout our relationship. Like, I've been able to do that throughout. And especially I think that that's helped us through times of conflict. So where, you know, if you're not afraid to be vulnerable, it certainly goes a long way for conflict resolution. Again, we're talking about intimacy, and that's one of the tenets of intimacy is vulnerability. So I think setting that precedence from the beginning and allowing the other person to understand that, look, it's okay to be vulnerable and still be a man, and it's fine. Just as a hint, you know, maybe you say, hey, give me a massage and see where that takes you.
I love that he's giving spicy tips. So one of the things that he experienced was me breaking this wall or this comfort level, because it can be uncomfortable, right? When you have boundaries set up. Some of you guys might not like physical affection. Me understanding, though, that a part of intimacy, there's several levels. There's emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, intellectual intimacy, and recreational intimacy. Physical intimacy is one of the things that are a part of like flirtation formulas that incorporate touch. Understanding the power of touch, especially on the male species, helps with making them feel comfortable to be able to reciprocate affection back. So incorporating the like massage me thing was somewhat selfish. I wanted to see if he gave good rubs, but I also wanted to see if he was willing to give in. I wanted to see if he would be willing to oblige me when asking for something, if he would step outside of his masculine and sit in his feminine and be willing to release something and willing to almost kind of somewhat embarrass himself and not look like a simp in public, but be willing to submit to me, because I knew I was ready to sit in my feminine and submit to him. I want the reciprocation and seeing if someone would submit to me. And so that was a physical way to be able to gauge whether me asking him for something he would do or not. And he did it. In front of everyone, he's like, okay, I'm just gonna oblige, because it's also like a win-win for him when it comes to touch. He also gets to rub on my body. So there was some method to my madness in that approach. There's several things that come with intimacy as well, such like I had mentioned earlier, like shared activities. And also through conversation, we're able to discuss certain things. So one of the things when it comes to intimacy and how you guide the alpha male to opening up to you is you sharing first. So first you're going to share with him about yourself, some of your accomplishments, some of your gifts, some of the life experiences that you've had that are positive. I always love to go in for the like, what's the best gift you've ever received? Those kind of questions get you to share, but then also you're going to share with them first and then inquire about them and get the alpha male to share back with you. So initially, they may not share right away. Just because you share doesn't mean that it's an opportunity for them to share. You actually have to pull that out of him. So I have a pattern, and through years of practice, of course, what I do with not just him, but also my clients is I'll share first and put myself out there about even a pain point or a positive, and then ask them, have they experienced something similar? What's their experience with that been like? What do they think about that? What do they feel about that? And then that opens them up to sharing more about themselves. And it may not even be a question that they've considered or an experience that they've had, but you're going to ask them to share with you. You're actually going to pull that from them. And then once they share with you, you're going to respond in a way that shows that you care, that supports what they said and makes them feel like that nurturing feminine side of you, as opposed to trying to top it and compete with them after they share and sit in your masculine and be like, oh, well, I experienced that too. And, I won that award. Like, no, we're actually going to affirm when he shares with me the accomplishments that he's gotten at the office or the sports that he's played or how he's such an athlete because he ran track in high school. Really? You ran track 20 years ago? You're an incredible athlete. I have to do that often with him, okay? So it looks like an affirmation after they've shared with you. But what that says in the male psyche is this is a safe place. She supports what I share. And it creates a pattern of them feeling like they are allowed to then open up and share with us. So giving them the backstory on intimacy, now I want us to dive into what communication looks like.
It's chaotic, man.
No, communication, which is like, of course, part of my expertise. I one thing that I'm just going to give you kudos in advance. I didn't instill this in you. You came into the relationship already an amazing communicator. I think you even helped with all my studies and all of my research and practice, and even the service that I provide. There's things that you still till this day teach me about communication and my delivery and how I should be improving upon my delivery to you. One thing that I witnessed growing up in my household was a lot of yelling and screaming, a lot of chaos when it came to communication, a lot of being reprimanded or reacting emotionally. And some within my community would call that like your parents having an emotional hurricane effect, which would then make me, I had to make a choice. Do I want to replicate that and that form of communication, or do I want something different? And I had to make a conscious decision after seeing that I could potentially spiral out of control and overreact to things, that I wanted a different form of communication for my relationship and then also for my future offspring. So understanding what I did about communication and how communication formulas work and how I needed to show up, I knew that when conflict arose, or even in my approach with communication, that there were certain arguments that I wasn't going to win, or certain things that I needed to back down from that didn't serve my ultimate goal of connecting or fostering joy with my partner or healing in that moment. And that's something that I've actually like had to practice over and over, because my clapback game is strong and I have a tongue like a snake, like my mama.
You mean like admitting when she's wrong? That is the theme that every man wants to hear. Does she admit when she's wrong? Does she?
That has been a work in progress. Like, I feel like you sat with me on that and have been like, dang, I just need you in this moment to take accountability. And there are certain times that I will have like, but this is why this happened. And this is, and you're like, nope, it doesn't need to be a long extended conversation. Just take accountability. And I think that that's something that I definitely appreciate about you, that you helped me strengthen, because oftentimes we try to like over explain, or we try to like make excuses, and I should know better, because excuses are the tools of the incompetent used to build monuments of nothingness. Those who specialize in them seldom amount to anything. I should know better, but when it comes to the relationship, right, there's a certain self-perception that you have of yourself. We can talk a little about ego, and how our ego plays a role in who we think that we are. And when our partner communicates to us that we're not picture perfect, or we don't got it all going on the way that we think that we do, that's not in alignment with the vision or the perception that you have of yourself. Your ego starts to talk trash to you and say like, is this person right or is this person wrong? Because I think you're the bomb.com. And then you kind of have to check your ego and say like, actually my partner knows what they're talking about. These are things that I need to work on. Because in this moment I could try to be right and talk him down or prove to him what my opinion is and why he's wrong. But the truth of the matter is if I take accountability, there's actually room for growth, and I can improve upon these things. And you're great at holding a mirror up on like what I need to improve upon.
It's important. I mean, accountability is a cousin of responsibility. So it's when someone is able to do that, especially a woman who takes accountability to a man that seems, oh, well, she's taking ownership, she's taking responsibility. It almost as if it's like taking a load off for some men, saying, okay, so she's capable of taking responsibility of this so that I don't have to. And that's a huge sort of relief for men, especially in a relationship. We often look at, the level of responsibility we have as men, for lack of a better way of putting that. It's something that we're nurtured, we're taught that as a man you have to do this, you have to do this. And when a woman takes that type of accountability or responsibility, that it says to us that this person can be trusted, this person is responsible, she's mature, this is a person that can take care of my kids. So that speaks a lot, and it comes from just taking accountability. That speaks volumes to a man, especially if we're talking about alpha male, where we're taught to take responsibility of everything, and so again, another tip, another spicy tip: take accountability. We've learned to become better partners throughout this journey. But it's important that we acknowledge that and we learn. If computers can learn from mistakes with artificial intelligence, as intelligent beings, we certainly should be able to do that and not make those mistakes repetitively.
And the key factor that he's saying right here is like learning from mistakes, right? So I do think that our previous relationships are somewhat like internships or previous, positions that you had that do prepare you for the job to a certain level. You're not going to know completely what it's like to be married until you get into the marriage. But whether you're in a relationship right now, boyfriend and girlfriend, or even a situationship, you want to practice the skill set of healthy communication so that you can be prepared for your purpose mate. And that's not your first time practicing, attempting to improve upon the things that you know that you needed to 5 years ago. Like, we shouldn't be hopping from relationship to relationship so that we don't have to work on ourselves. If anything, we should be going from relationship with what did I learn from that past one? What do I want to see differently? And that's one thing that I made a conscious decision was I'm not going to speak to the men like I did in the past, because I realized from the way that I would emasculate them or the way that I would go for the jugulars that I didn't like the way that it made me feel when they would reciprocate, or I didn't like the way that it would make them feel. And I didn't like how I became ugly in those moments, right? Because we all have a history in the past, but how do you learn from those? And so knowing what I wanted, my partnership to look like, I had to practice that and work on that, and then communicate, this is what I would like it to look like, and then actually make behavioral changes in the relationship that I could get him on board with, that he would be like, okay, I understand your perspective. I can tweak this, or I can improve upon this. And he does that with me all the time. He's like, can you be more mindful of X, Y, and Z? Can we work as a team to do X, Y, and Z? So while it is a continuous learning process, you also have to hold each other accountable. Like, sometimes I'm going to lose it and I'm not always going to hold myself accountable like I should. But that's what I have you for, to hold me accountable, and vice versa. But it's a process. It's a process. But I say all this to say that when it comes to your masculine and feminine, how do you want to show up in your feminine energy when it comes to speaking to a very alpha masculine man? Because he is going to lean more into being more direct. He isn't going to always sugarcoat things for you. He is going to be more stern. He is going to be somewhat more competitive when it comes to his energy. And he is going to feel a lot confident in everything that he's delivering, even if he's not right. So how do you, as a woman sitting in your feminine, guide that energy and say, hey, what motivates my partner to make different decisions? What way can I deliver this information based on what I've learned about this person who I'm dealing with to guide him to a different perspective, or at least understand the opinion that I'm sharing with him? Like, what is it going to take in my message delivery that he's responsive to? I've tried the hard way. I've tried the mean way. I've tried the way. Let me try the loving way. Okay, let me see if I can affirm him. You have to learn what works for your partner and then adjust to that, whether it feels good or not. You want the health when it comes, at the end of the day, to the relationship. You want a healthy relationship.
She's making a good point around appealing to what someone, what motivates an individual. And oftentimes in business, we talk about business chemistry. What does that mean? What is a driver? What is a pioneer? What is a guardian? And so on and so forth. It's important to understand who you're dealing with so that you can then appeal to them. And that's part of understanding or learning who it is that you're in a relationship with. And if you haven't taken the time to do that, then you're wasting your time, quite honestly, because that's the most important part around trying to form that beautiful bond, is getting to know who this individual is. And at the same time, we talk about vulnerability. That person has to allow themselves to be, truthfully, to be vulnerable enough so that you can understand who they are, and they need to be forthcoming with certain information. I can't tell you how many times we agree on it. I hate when people hold certain things back and not say, like, why didn't you say that before? Or
whenever we're
like
watching movies and the characters are like not telling their partner the thing, we're like, why don't they just tell him?
Something, right? Like, I mean, that could have all been avoided if you didn't hold that piece of information. You think that was important? So it's important that we share the right pieces of information with each other, because it enables that person, and if that person's consciously doing what they're supposed to be doing, it benefits you. If you withhold that information, it doesn't benefit you at all.
I love this point that you just brought up, because you're also making me think of the importance of timing when it comes to communication and how you deliver your message. There's been times where I know that we have no passive aggressive in this relationship. We have to share our feelings and share so that we're not holding on to it and like imploding on each other later. But timing is important, and it's also important to take a beat, but knowing when it's appropriate to deliver information to your partner about things you want them to work on. And you don't want to do it when the energy isn't appropriate, right? Like there's been times where I feel like I've thrown you off, and I didn't necessarily schedule a conversation with you in regards to addressing certain things that had hurt my feelings or that bothered me. And I threw it on you later when, you needed to be in a certain mind state, or,
it just sounded like she had to schedule time with you.
Well, what I mean is like a spicy tip that I give my clients is like, let your partner know, like, hey, are you free around 6 o'clock for us to talk about X, Y, and Z? And like, I didn't do that. I remember going to the shower one time and like, you hurt my feelings earlier and da-da-da-da-da. And that wasn't a moment that you were like going out with your friends, and like, that wasn't a moment that I should have lambasted you or like gone in on what you did, because one, we didn't have time to share in that experience. You weren't able to really sit in your empathy of like what I was experiencing, and it wasn't appropriate, because I also like, I took my beat and I took my space, but knowing that you were going to be fully present for me in that moment, that you and it wasn't the right time. And so,
you sure you weren't being like, I'm gonna ruin your day like how you ruined mine?
You have ruined my mornings before. Like when I have on-camera appearances,
she gets into this beast.
Wants
like,
to
I can't even say her name. She's like, oh, don't harass me.
So like, timing is important. He does the same. Okay, so that was a different experience. I didn't intentionally mean to do the one that I'm giving an example of. But what you're speaking to is when I have media appearances, and you want to,
I don't know if that was the case that day.
You nag me before my media appearances, and I'm like, I just need my space. I need my candles lit. Like I need my time to myself, my makeup done before like my media appearance. And you start getting nitpicky on me, and like, that's what I don't want. That's not when you should be doing it. So timing, I say all this to say like, timing is important. And when you're delivering information, know your partner, know when they need space, know when they can handle something. And if you guys can be on the same page about wanting to have that discussion. So like sharing with them and letting them know, babe, I want to have this discussion with you. What's an appropriate time to talk about it? Gives them a choice and an option, and then lets you know what when they'll be open to receiving that information that you have to share. So that's just a spicy tip when it comes to timing. We've had to work hard on that. Still, that one timing thing is a work in progress, but I'm just giving you like helpful tips on along the way. And of course, like there's things that I learned along the way too. You'll be learning from your partner or whomever it is that you're dating while you're going through these experiences. The last thing to wrap it up that I need to talk about is learning to say yes. When you are a alpha queen and you're used to giving orders and you're bossy as hell, like myself, I'm hella bossy, and you're also dealing with a boss, right? Or at least you're trying to maybe even attract a boss. One thing that you want to be mindful of is sitting in your feminine energy and not always having to be the person directing and giving orders. I think one thing that I also showed up with in our relationship was, and I remind my clients to do this all the time, and you guys as listeners, is give the male a choice so that he feels like he made the decision. So what you would do, and I appreciate that you did this with me as well, when on one of our initial dates, you had given me like movie options. I really loved that. And then like I made you explain to me like why you chose the movie choices that you chose.
So it was sort of a test also. I needed to see what I was working with as far as, we love movies, so that's a common interest that we have. And that was you never know. You can't just pick a movie and just say, okay, I hope she likes it. So I gave her a list of movies that, it wouldn't matter so much if we watched whichever one we watched, but the one she picked or we agreed on speaks volumes as to whether or not we would share that interest. So I sort of had this is the one I really want. I wouldn't mind watching this. And, I wouldn't miss watching this. Like, that sort of thing. Obviously, I wasn't going to pick a certain movie that I didn't want to watch, per se, or would be a waste of my time. But it was just sort of a spectrum to see where she sat. And we actually agreed on the same movie. I actually don't remember what the movie
I know, I don't either. But what I liked, the reason why I bring the movie thing up, though, is because when you had asked what we wanted to do, right? Some women that would be bothered, they would be like, well, why can't you just make the plan? You asked like what I wanted to do, and I said like I want to go to the movies. That's my telltale of whether we're compatible or not. Even though for some it's silent and it doesn't give you time to talk. I was trying to see a movie. So knowing that we would get something to eat afterwards, we would talk. But like him not necessarily having to come up with the movie plan, me letting him know I want the movie, but then him giving me options as far as like what movies to see based on his test if we're compatible or not. What it did is it gave autonomy. It made me feel like I had a choice in the matter, but then it also made him feel like he had a choice in the matter in the movie options that he gave, right? He didn't put out anything that he wasn't willing to see. And like that's a tactic or a technique right there that works oftentimes with your partner, is like you giving them options or choices when it comes to letting them feel like they're leading the situation. So I really appreciated that dynamic that he created, and he set it up for success dealing with an alpha woman. And he set himself up for success in being able to show that like he could do some planning if I just guide him in my alphaness. But like then sitting back at my feminine, and these are the choices that he gave, right? And appreciating those choices and then showing appreciation afterwards for that. And guiding him saying, hey, I love when you took this initiative. I really appreciate that you gave me these options. And I even love that you communicated the benefits of seeing each film. And so you have to affirm your partner after they've done something like that. You have to say like, yes, thank you. I love that you did this. And it's another technique that I call, petting the dog. If you like something that your partner does, you want to.
I like that one.
Most men don't. But like, and it's not that the man is a dog, but what it is you're affirming them. You're getting them to perform that trick again. So you have to tell them when they're doing a great job at something so that they know, oh, okay, she likes when I do X, Y, and Z. She likes when I take initiative. She likes when I present options. Let me do this thing again.
Fellas, it works both ways.
It works both ways. Us as women, I love that you like made me feel like I get choices in things as well. And like
petting the cat.
That's a good one. I like that. Petting the cat. Yes, I do like that. So if it's like a double entendre, you could use that too. But like the point is that yes, it works both ways. But like when it comes to learning to say yes, oftentimes when you're used to like being bossy and giving orders, and you also are very headstrong and direct in giving orders, because you two are a boss, you both always can't be in that exact moment bosses. Like at a certain point, you have to sit back in your leadership position and say, okay, I'm going to allow this person to be president in this moment, and I'll play VP. And that goes hand in hand for man and woman. The man doesn't always need to be president, or woman doesn't always need to be president or VP, but like you need to take turns in when it comes to decision making, knowing what your partner's strengths are and allowing them to lead you and allowing them to feel like they're leading you. And what that looks like is giving them the options, letting them make choices, sometimes even leading you blindly and having faith in them, even when you're a little nervous, but like at least giving them that chance. And my alpha women who have a lot of control or decide like they need to control situations to make sure that the outcome is the best, I do believe in creating opportunities of what you want to happen. But when it comes to sitting in your feminine, you have to allow them to show up for you first before you decide that they can't do something. And even when they show up and it may not be exactly specifically how you wanted, the way that you correct for that is one, showing appreciation for what they did do. And then next time, maybe adding a little bit more input on what you would like. Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely makes sense. But ultimately, you know, in some instances, and I think, you know, just as a nod to the alpha men, at some point, it's not necessarily about, like you said, it's not a competition, but we do have a responsibility because ultimately, whatever decisions are made, we have to be comfortable with those decisions. So it's not as if I'm saying that we have the sort of the ultimate veto power, but we do sit in that energy where we do, and we have to control that sort of responsibility and power that we do have and be aware of it, and not abuse it. I think that's very important that we don't abuse that power because that can, you know, create, conflict. But we have to acknowledge that, yes, we ultimately have the last call, but we have to be responsible enough to relinquish some of that power. And that's the most important thing we can do as alpha men.
I love that. Thank you, Papi. Yes is also about your belief system as well. And so believing that you have the ability, but also that you're capable of attracting your purpose mate, and that you are able to show up for them the way that you want them to show up for you is also a part of like learning to say yes. Yes to the universe, yes to your spiritual practice, to your God, and yes to yourself. Giving yourself permission to love the person unconditionally and trusting that although they can hurt you, they won't. And a lot of people have a hard time with yes because they won't give up the reins. They won't trust someone with that power. And it's a muscle. Yes, you may be rejected when it comes to relationships prior, or you have a past history of being hurt. But you have to work through that pain and that rejection muscle to strengthen it so that you can make room for the person who isn't going to intentionally hurt you, the person who is going to have your best interest in mind. And if you operate from a place or a belief system that person's never going to come and you don't think that person exists, then it's going to be a lot harder to manifest them if you think that it's a unicorn, versus operating from a place of knowing that they exist, being confident, and showing up in every relationship, bringing your best foot forward. And when that person may or may not show up for you, being able to get off the pot quicker, move on to the next person who does serve you is a great way to build that muscle up. So I applaud you. And my last question for you, I do have another question for you. Okay, so we mentioned earlier that you are the superior man, which I absolutely love.
You said that.
I've diagnosed him as that. I've proclaimed. When it comes to one thing that comes with the superior man and the superior woman is capable of guiding her emotions and reeling them in. I think that the superior man is amazing also with guiding the female emotions. How do you reel my emotions in when you see me getting frustrated, or you see me, because I am way more emotional than you, when you see me overreacting or getting frustrated and like losing it sometimes? What do you think that what do you do?
So I'll caveat that. I wouldn't necessarily say you're way more emotional. You succumb to your emotions more often.
Okay.
So I think it's having that understanding, playing off strength. Let's dial it back to strengths. I'd like to think that one of my strengths is putting things in perspective. So I always allude back to the term business chemistry because it's something that, you know, for my professional career, we talk about all the time. And me managing a team of staff and employees, part of what I do has to play on that. But me being a driver, getting things done, having that sort of mindset, I can't necessarily just steamroll over things. I have to sort of take time and have patience to understand, to make sure everybody's on board and nobody falls off the train. And so just in that mindset, I'm always looking to say, okay, are you okay? What do we need to do? I'm a problem solver. What do we need to do to solve your issue? And let's do that so that this train can keep moving, because I need it to keep moving. Because I realize that it's not going to go anywhere unless this person is on board. So that sort of mindset always has me, catering to, okay, what's wrong? You're having a meltdown. Snap out of it. Yo, I'm a yachty, strength, no weakness, all them things. What's wrong? Let's get over this. Because you right now, we're not moving. We're just here and we're not getting anywhere. So my first instinct is to be like, all right, let's solve this. Now, look, you're not going to solve every problem. And sometimes they don't want you to solve it. Sometimes they just want you to listen and not try to fix everything. The old sort of stereotype of the man always trying to fix something and trying to fix it from our point of view. That, we know where that ends up. So the first thing you got to do is just listen. Tap into that emotional intelligence. Listen to what she's, her complaint is that sometimes she just wants to just cuddle and hug it out and just, until she gets over it, sooner than later, hopefully. And then we keep moving. But, she succumbs to that, and especially in stressful situations. She has learned over the years, though, to deal with things and more things. And as she's matured into her bosshood throughout time. I know there were a couple of times when you were back in grad school and you had some emotional breakdown.
Yes, I was like, why, Lord, has thou forsaken me?
I went to grad school 10 years back, and I was like, look, man, get over this. Like, what are you doing? This is normal. Like, come on, man. Like, you kind of have to, sometimes you got to give her a good kick in the ass, a metaphorical kick in the ass.
I think it's a good balance. I think the balance of sometimes knowing, okay, let me push you and help you with strength and weakness. And then other times just being like a shoulder for emotional support. Right. But for a lot of women though, and because I'm speaking to my alpha women, allowing ourselves to be weak in front of you is sometimes a hard thing. And I think that that's something that I had to decide, like, okay, I'm going to make a choice to trust this person, knowing that in this moment I'm going to show weakness and see how he shows up for me when I do show weakness. And if he's incapable of handling my emotions, then that would let me know, pull it back. So you do have to somewhat test or measure your partner's capabilities when you're first dating them to see how they handle you in duress or how they handle conflict, so that you can learn more about what you can present. And I think that that's what we don't do. We're only measuring the success of our relationship by the good times and not necessarily by like that conflict resolution or the hard times and letting them show up for you through that. We want to paint this, perfect picture, but then we don't really get to see how they really handle, your crazy family, or how they handle you under stress. Like, you want to be able to see that person and how they, how that plays out when you're dealing with them, and especially in the dating before you decide to see it in the marriage.
Absolutely. And so one of the things, and we have this debate all the time about what does it mean to be empathetic versus sympathetic. And ultimately, I think we can all agree on that in these times of emotional stress, nobody wants sympathy. Most people don't really want sympathy. Well, some people might, but superior people don't. I'm just going to throw that out there. We don't want your sympathy, right? That's true. But empathy is important. And we may not have had the same experience, but you can try to reach back to something, understanding how they're feeling. Reach back to a situation where you may have felt the same way, and you can certainly empathize with the way they are feeling. You may not have had a similar experience, but you can empathize with how they're feeling. And again, you don't determine how someone feels, because you don't feel you should feel that way for that circumstance, but it's the way they're feeling. And we can all empathize, unless we're just completely devoid of emotions, with how someone feels in the moment. And we can have empathy, and I think it's important to understand the difference and how that everybody, if you're a very stable human being, can have empathy. I think this is an important thing to have. And having that, think about, well, and again, you may have dealt with it differently, but it allows you to take a step back and be like, you know what? Okay, I understand how you feel. Tell me more. How can we resolve this? And that's important. And I think not enough people really do that. And just doing that moves, it takes a long way. it can move mountains. We can move mountains. You know what we can do if people have more empathy? And, you know, for me, it was part of my growth, not only, you know, personally, but professionally. And I think it's helped me in business. It's helped us in our relationship and business. And I think that's the theme. If anything that we could take from the last 4 years of I think emotional intelligence and more importantly, having more empathy certainly can go a long way.
And I think for like my alpha females that are listening too, that's something that we can sometimes forget too to have for our partner, right? Like when the camera's on us, the mic is on us, like we want to be able to like let loose and let our hair down and sit in our feminine and go ahead and be emotional and him be supportive. But we also have to have the grace and give our partner permission to do that as well. It may not look like he's like weeping like us, but he should be allowed to express his emotions without us attacking him or putting him on the defense. Because oftentimes what happens is we want our person to be emotionally attached or close with us, but only certain emotions. We don't give room or provide space for them to be hurt, for them to be frustrated, for them to show any type of weakness. And when they do, we tend to run. I
think we should caveat that showing emotions should not be
not weakness.
A sign of weakness.
It's not.
Definitely.
But you have permission to say, hey, in this moment, I am weak. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn, or I don't know what options I have, or like you should have permission to express that you are concerned or even afraid. Us as alpha women oftentimes don't give our partners permission to do that, therefore making them put this, you know, masquerade on or this wall up, always having to be strong for us because we have this expectation like, well, you're an alpha man, that's not what I signed up for. And all the while, like not giving them permission to also sit in their feelings and go through like real life experiences with us. So I just want to encourage my alpha women to like give them space for that as well, especially if you want that for yourself. You have to reciprocate. And I think what my husband was speaking to earlier was, you know, the mirror effect, like him doing that for me, therefore me doing that for him, therefore him giving it back to me and me give, like, it's a reciprocal, it's an interactive experience that goes continuously on so that that person knows that like you are their rock, but you're also their pillow. And so you have to learn how to do both and learn how to pivot
both. A hard
both.
Pillow though.
Okay, I want to put a disclaimer out there before I wrap up on this conversation. I absolutely love my beta women and my beta men. I want to let you guys know that right now. The women who sit, you know, tremendously in their feminine or even in their masculine, but like also the men who sit very much in their feminine and masculine. I love alpha and beta equal. However, I knew what was necessary for me and what I wanted based on my dating experience. And so you guys have to know that as well. You have to be very clear on what serves you. And also, are you willing to make the changes and adjustments in order to be with that type of partner? So I want you to, you know, be very clear on that. Think about that. And
the next podcast would be on beta. Who should do that?
I love that you're just going to be producing my next episode. Okay.
Operation say.
Okay.
Who's gonna do that though? Who would you get? No, don't say any names.
Okay, I'm not gonna put it out there yet, but we'll have that conversation about what that relationship looks like.
Are there men that would admit to being a beta man?
And unfortunately, it doesn't have the best stigma behind it, like the stereotype that comes with being a beta man. I'm gonna dispel that and give you later on like benefits to that. But for this episode in particular, I wanted to focus purely on like what my target demo is, what my target listenership is. Like the type of women and men that turn to me the most are these like very alpha women and very alpha men who want to understand like how more to nurture intimacy in a relationship and how to soften and where to lean into their masculine, where to lean into their feminine. So I wanted to address that with you. I'll probably make all my clients watch this, make it a part of the curriculum too. But thank you, Bobby, for coming on today's episode. I'm wrapping it up. Let everybody know where they can find you.
You can find me. You can find me. No. Social media, Smart Jamaican, of course. Yes. Smart Jamaican. That is my handle on across the board.
Yes. And you guys can always play with my Twitter or stroke my Instagram at SpicyMadi. Go to thespicylife.com, schedule a free consultation so you can learn more about the program. Click and subscribe to this episode. Make sure that you pass it along to a friend. And there you guys have it. You have just been spiced.
The Spicy